I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother,
For over 3 decades, the world believed the narrative ended in that Paris tunnel. The royal marriage had failed, the princess had left, and all that remained was a path of grief and unresolved questions. However, not all of it was buried alongside her. A Cartier watch is kept in a glass case in a quiet nook of Buckingham Palace. It ended at 12:36 a.m. Princess Diana's heart stopped beating precisely on August 31st, 1997. Some think it was just a coincidence. Some have altered their minds because King Charles recently received a little unlabeled box as he prepared for his coronation. Inside was Diana's antique mahogany jewelry box, something far more intimate than the ornate artifacts on display at official meals. There was a letter buried beneath the lid, written by hand, known, heart-stopping, to Charles. Only when you understand the genuine meaning of love can you be open. He found more than just jewelry within. It was an admission. Diana kept it a secret. Everything Charles thought he knew about their history, love, and her final days would be erased. It wasn't just a box. The reckoning had begun. The morning of March 15th, 2024, at Buckingham Palace began as usual. In his private study, King Charles sat surrounded by documents, the weight of a crown that never fully lifted, and faint staff murmurs that echoed down the corridor. His desk was stacked high with foreign briefings, coronation notes, and the never-ending list of constitutional tasks that now dominated his days. These routines, the structure, the duty, and the distractions provided him with comfort. However, everything changed that morning. Sir Clive Alderton, his private secretary, entered bringing the usual stack of royal letters, invitations, and official envelopes. But there was something special among the commonplace. A little rectangular packet. There is no address for return. There is no formal seal. Only an old-fashioned label and a fading wrapping of light blue paper. Even though it was faded, the handwriting was still visible. Classy, skewed, familiar without effort. Charles paused. His face had lost its color. He recognized that handwriting as well as his own, even after all these years. Diana, should I have it checked by security? Alderton inquired quietly, sensing a shift in the mood. Charles slowly shook his head. No, get away from me. He broke the seal in the study, alone with shaky hands. Inside was a little mahogany-carved box with the Spencer family insignia, barely discernible after years of use. He opened the top, releasing Diana's favorite perfume, jasmine and rosewater, into the air. He was unprepared for the flood of recollections that rushed over him. And there was an envelope, addressed in her hand, perched lightly on top. It simply said, Charles. He took long to open it. Charles remained there for a long time, holding the envelope as if it were fragile, too delicate to disturb. His fingertips stroked the edges, absorbing the weight of everything left unsaid and unsolved. The once professional and protocol-filled study has taken on a confessional tone. When he finally opened it, the paper was smooth and cream-colored, with a trace of yellowing from age. Dated August 29, 1997. Her death was just 2 days away. The initial line struck him like a wave. I'm already gone, Charles, my dearest, if you're reading this. Emotions filled his eyes. Emotions he hadn't shed in years. And the words grew foggy. Not in public, not even in private. He forced himself to keep reading, blinking. I left you something that holds the truth that I was never able to utter out, and I knew it would break you, not because I didn't want to, but because it broke me first. She described their love as something that was once real, rather than the shattered public narrative that made headlines, something buried beneath duty and deceit, something that had never truly died. She penned, "It was just us once, before the world became too noisy. We were strangers before the palace, before the media, before everything demanded." Charles leaned in his chair, the letter pressing against his chest, and he could almost hear her voice, which was quiet, bold, and unfinished. And this was just the beginning. He discovered something unexpected beneath the first letter. The jewelry box's lining was not quite right. There was a tiny, slightly elevated seam, and Charles, suddenly shaking, brushed his fingertips along the velvet inside until he located it. With a little tug, the false bottom fell loose. Another note, buried for nearly 30 years, appeared hasty. The handwriting was less accurate, and the ink had been stained by tears. The date in the corner was August 30th, 1997, the night before the crash. He slowly unfurled it. It began, "Charles, I'm going to Paris tonight. However, I must be honest with you. You should be notified before it's too late." As the words disclosed a secret he could never have predicted, his gaze moved quickly over the page. "James was not the parent of the child I lost in December 1985. You had her, our daughter." Everything came to a halt for a split second. The air in the room became thicker, and the floor appeared to vanish beneath Charles. It was a daughter, a child he had never heard of. She gave a comprehensive explanation of how the pregnancy had been kept a secret. She was afraid to inform him at the time because she feared he would not want another kid and would see it as a trap. She had no wish for compassion. All she wanted was to preserve what little remained between them safe. The statement continued. "I gave her the name Elizabeth Rose. For your mother Elizabeth, my middle name is Rose, and she is grave near the ancient oak tree in Althorpe. I performed a low-key burial, just the priest and myself, with no headlines or cameras. Grief alone." Charles's knuckled hands grasped the letter hard, and memories of that winter raced through his mind. The strain, her abrupt retreat, the clues he had missed, and the feelings she had hidden. Diana had been privately grieving their kid for many years. He was now weeping for her. Charles sat motionless for a few minutes, holding the letter to his chest and attempting to catch his breath. He was experiencing regret, agony, and the horrifying realization of how much he had missed, in addition to grief. Their silence at the time had concealed a daughter's life, not just betrayal or rage. He reached for the velvet pouch that had been tucked under the note. It was soft and small, and the light caught the glint of white gold as he opened it. There was a fragile locket inside, which he was unaware of. Diana had made this decision privately and with great care for herself. As he clicked it open, the world seemed to come to a halt. The design was simple and understated, with a single diamond in the center that was stylish but not overpowering. On one side, a picture of him and Diana from their engagement, youthful and content and untarnished by controversy, is exhibited, and something inside him was aroused by the image, which depicts them before everything went wrong. On the other, there's a blurry ultrasound and a faint profile of a child. Charles took a time to understand what he was seeing, but the breath left his lungs in a single, crushing gasp after he did. It was authentic. Diana had written more than just about their daughter, and for all these years, she had kept the proof hidden and protected. I loved it. He held the locket in his palm as if it were made of glass. It was not a royal heritage, and it was not meant for public exhibition. It was a mother's tribute to the father who was oblivious of the child she had lost. Charles grieved violently for the first time in decades, for the daughter he had never named, Elizabeth Rose, for Diana, who suffered silently, for all the time he would never get back, the consolation he had not supplied, and the words they had not uttered. This jewelry box was more than just a keepsake from Diana's past. Her truth was carefully tucked away, waiting for the moment when he was ready to face it. Just when Charles thought there couldn't be any more, he discovered a final envelope buried beneath the locket, fatter this time, bulging slightly with pages, lined paper, packed from margin to margin, a single instruction across the front. Read this last. He slowly opened it and found what appeared to be a journal entry from July 15, 1997, 6 weeks before her death. Charles felt his heart begin to crumble anew with the first sentence. "Charles, I've been thinking about us again. Not the US that everyone saw, but the real us, before the titles and before the pain." She talked about long-forgotten memories, of evenings at Balmoral when they would slip past the formalities and take a stroll under the sky, of how she had once sworn to back him in keeping the man beneath the crown, and of how he used to laugh, real, unrestrained laughter. She stated, "You didn't want to lose yourself, so you were scared of becoming king. I promised to help you remember who you were, but I let you down." The woman the tabloids described as bitter and impulsive did not write the words on the page. This was not the indignant, damaged princess, but an honest and accountable woman, who was thinking about regret rather than retribution. She admitted, "I was absorbed in my own suffering. When I should have shielded our wounds, I exposed them. I forgot how to see you because I wanted to be seen so much." Charles closed his eyes as the pages shook in his hands. Only headlines and camera flashes had previously revealed the world their demise. In her own words, however, this was the silent story of a woman who had always loved him, even when she didn't know how to show it. This was Diana without her stage presence, sincere, flawed, and terribly human. After turning the page, Charles's lingering calm was broken by what he read next. Diana had wrote, "I've made a decision. My relationship with Dodie is coming to an end. It never happened. It was just a diversion, possibly even a call for attention, but my heart isn't in it. It never has been." For years, everyone thought Diana had moved on, finally free of the monarchy and its constraints, and had found happiness with someone else. However, she admitted that freedom had been a ruse. She admitted, "I wanted you to notice. I wanted to feel like I belonged again, but I missed you much more when I claimed to love someone else." Charles looked at the paper in blankness. The headlines, the yacht, the vacations, and the images of Diana and Dodie were all expertly orchestrated. Behind it, a woman was striving to locate the only place she had ever felt safe. To him, she replied, "I've asked a meeting, a personal one, not a press, not a palace, me and you alone. I'd like to speak, for the first time in years, genuinely communicate, not in the royal sense, not as strangers, as two worried persons." She was on the way home, to him, not to the palace. As Charles read those phrases, he knew that the life they could have established, hidden underneath decades of sadness and solitude, was within reach, until destiny intervened. The next diary post was recorded the night before the crash, on August 30th, 1997. Charles's fingers shook as he unfolded the sheet, already feeling the weight of what was ahead. The hasty and uneven handwriting suggested that she had written it during an intense tempest. "I nearly gave you a call tonight. There were only 5 words, yet they had an unforgettable impact. I answered the phone 3 times and began dialing 3 times, but each time I froze. What if you've moved on? What if you decide you no longer want me? What if I've caused too much hurt to be forgiven?" Charles let out a gasp. He was overly familiar with that night. At Balmoral, he had been alone, pacing his study and wrestling with the same issues. He'd seen images in the papers of Diana laughing with Dodie in Paris. Despite this, he had a gut sense she wasn't done with him. He had taken up the phone twice, then set it down again. The entry continued. "I wanted to tell you everything, that I was returning, that I was picking us up again. However, the words became stuck. I am now writing them, just in case." Charles gave a low sob. The telephone had never rung. Neither had the fortitude to leave. One day too late, the opportunity was lost, eternally buried in the quiet between 2 people who had finally summoned the courage. Charles examined the last letter in the pile. The envelope featured the following bold, underlined text: "Emergency, just for Charles." He opened the pages with nervous hands. Her other entries had a tranquil, meditative tone, but this one did not. The handwriting was rushed and crooked. The words convey a strong sense of urgency. "Charles, be aware that this trip is not what it seems if something were to happen to me in Paris." His heartbeat quickened. "Yes, Dodie and I are together, but not because I love him. It is not a vacation. It is a cover." An anonymous warning had been delivered to Diana 3 weeks before to Paris. Someone was aware of Elizabeth Rose. In addition to the pregnancy, she had undergone treatment at the clinic, and they claimed to have medical papers that should have been disposed of. They also threatened to let them go. "They wish for me to disappear, get away of the spotlight, put an end to your charity efforts, stop voicing your ideas. They threatened to reveal the files if I didn't. Depict yourself as cutthroat, chilly, a spouse who abandoned me when I was most in danger." As he read, Charles's jaw tightened. Diana had not gone to Paris for leisure or love. She had gone to ensure their family's safety, to buy time, to shield the monarchy from an unsustainable controversy. She went on to remark, "Dodie knows nothing. He feels I am finally getting over this, but you are the only thing on my mind, as well as our boys. Also, we lost our daughter." Charles' chest tightened. She had not died in pursuit of love. She died striving to suppress a flood of secrets. Secrets she had never had to bear alone. Charles discovered one last bundle of papers, neatly folded and meticulously clipped together beneath the emergency letter. A prepared schedule, reproductions of letters, and handwritten notes were all available. A short memo at the top, September 1st, 1997, 3 p.m., Windsor Castle Private Chapel. There was a covert meeting, not in conformity with palace protocol. No aides, no protection, just the two of them. In order to circumvent the stringent framework of royal secret, she had even hired middlemen, discreet supporters, and trusted acquaintances. According to one letter addressed to Sir Robert Fellows, Charles had already been alerted and had agreed to go. Charles recalled it. Fellows had made a foggy suggestion about a private subject that required delicacy a few days before the crash, but he hadn't persisted since he assumed it was political, which was typical. He had no idea it was her. Diana's draft speech for the meeting was concealed in the stack. Although being handwritten and with modifications in the margins, the meaning was clear. It began, "I acknowledge my mistakes, but I believe what we had was genuine, and there is still time." She did not ask for forgiveness or peace. Instead, she quietly and sincerely proposed a partnership, a new beginning for themselves, their family, and a departure from the spotlight. The pages were crushed against Charles' chest, and she was ready. She had been returning. However, Diana's journey ended in a Paris underground rather than a private chapel. Furthermore, the encounter that could have changed the course of royal history did not take place. There was a tiny black cassette at the very bottom of the jewelry box, practically buried by the final fold of silk. There was no date or label, and she merely wrote one line in her hand. "For Charles, play by yourself." He paused for a moment before pressing the play button, unsure of how much more he could take. Eventually, he slipped the tape into an antique player he kept in his study, hands that had held newborn sons and signed treaties, which he hadn't touched in years. A quiet hiss filled the room, and she said, "Hello, Charles, my sweetheart." He paused, not because she had always called him darling in private, but because it sounded as if she was truly there, breathing next to him. Trying not to cry, I laughed quietly. "I am not sure if you will ever hear this. However, I felt compelled to express myself in case I couldn't do so in person." Her voice alternated between steady and weak. She reminisced of their sons' births, their late-night walks through Highgrove, and how he used to make her feel like the only woman in the world. Then she snapped, "Charles, I was upset, I felt scared. But my affection for you has never changed, even when I pretended I did. Even if I have brought you anguish, you were always the one." Charles remained motionless as the tape ended, surrounded by shards of a life he had forgotten he was still grieving over. He had never seen this kid before. He never actually had a wife. A story of love that the world thought it knew but did not. Diana had left that box free of animosity. The truth is what she left behind, and an opportunity for Charles, and possibly the entire world, to finally see her for who she truly was: imperfect, brave, loving, and very human. The jewelry box is now securely sealed and hidden behind a special door in Buckingham Palace, not because it is kept hidden, but because it is sacred. A reminder that even the most well-known people can have secret, quiet revelations that change everything. Furthermore, the king was unaffected by the incident in the end. When no one else was around, it was only her voice, battling for love. Some stories continue to change even after their completion. Subscribe now to read more about historical emotional legacies, royal secrets, and untold truths, because sometimes the past refuses to stop talking.